Hey, this is Shaheen over at Webupon, and this is episode number 7 of Chalk Talk Thursday. Today I wanted to cover how websites work. This is actually a super common question that I get all the time, and I think especially for business owners that are busy with everything else they're doing, it's hard to stay on top of all the little minute things that go into a website and what exactly is happening. So I'm going to explain those so you understand how it works and emphasize the key areas that every business owner should be aware of when it comes to actually owning their site and making sure that their developer isn't going to be in a position where they have undue leverage upon you. So starting off from your cell phone, when you type something in, it's going to go over to your ISP. So this can be any sort of internet service provider like Comcast or Cox or Netlink. I would like to say there's hundreds of them in the US, but there's probably about a dozen. So these are the people that are delivering internet to you directly, right? So from there, let's say you type in name.com, it's going to go off to and basically try to find something called a name server. So what the name server does is matches this letter, this word that you can understand, name.com or whatever it may be, with a string of numbers that's actually the address for a server. Now, the thing I really want to emphasize here, and this is again something that every business owner should understand, is that there's something called a domain name registrar. And this is something that you as the business owner really want to own. You want to own your domain name. Occasionally developers will buy the domain name for you just because they're trying to help you out. Some of them are more nefarious about it, but the thing to understand is you really want to own your name, right? It's like you sign the lease on your actual business storefront, right? You want to own the name. What this is a domain registrar. Now, domain registrars are separate from servers. So the server is the actual host. That's the data server that you're paying for. So some common hosts in the US are GoDaddy. You may have heard that name before, or DreamHost. I love using WPX host. So there's tons of hosts out there. And what they do is maintain the server space. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that these two things, the registrar and the host, can be separate, but they can also be the same thing. So you can have your name registered with a separate service, and you can have it hosted on a separate service. Often with GoDaddy installations, I'll find people have registered their name there, and they're also hosting it at GoDaddy. But in both cases, you as the business owner want to make sure that you're paying for and you sort of own your hosting, and you want to make sure that you paid for and you own your domain registration. You don't want to hit a situation where a couple of years into your business growth, you come upon a day and suddenly your website's down, and it's down because you haven't renewed your domain name or your actual hosting has gone down because you haven't paid for it, anything like that. So it's very important to remember that. So once it's at the actual server, it gets routed through some code. So this can be PHP or any number of other languages that are able to operate on the server. And what this code does is sends information out in HTML, JavaScript, it sends you the pictures, all these things you're probably familiar with. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that when it comes to the server code, this can also basically be functioning on a service that wraps the hosting in with the code. So if you're using WordPress, you're basically getting a code set that you're hosting on a server. So let's say you have a WordPress website, right? You may have paid for someone to get you a WordPress set up. You may have paid for a theme. That's all code focused, right? Now, you may also be paying for hosting for that same WordPress website, right? So you paid for the theme, you paid for the WordPress development, and it's sitting on a server, and then you also may have independently paid for a registrar for your domain name. It can also be the case that you paid for a name, you're on the same you're also hosting with the same company that's your domain registrar, and you also just use one of their site builders, something like that. But that's something that I think every business owner should really be aware of. I often encounter a lot of confusion around what a domain name registrar is and what an actual host is. And then so there are some services that are basically combining the code and the actual servers all into one package, so you're also paying for that. So something like that could be Shopify, or BigCommerce is a great one also that does this. Volution does this, but they're terrible as an SEO. I'm just going to throw that in there. don't go with Volution. Magento can also be grouped into here, but I wouldn't recommend them either. So basically with these services, you're paying for the code package and they're handling all the server hosting functions for you. They may also offer to register your domain name. I, of course, would always, just being the paranoid developer that I am, separately register my domain name so I own it from any other services. And then that way you're basically secure no matter what happens. And that's a good place to be for any business owner, especially when you're investing a lot of time and money into your brand name and into your business growth. So you have these stacks of code that are operating on servers, and what they're serving are HTML and pictures and JavaScript. And then at the end there, what's happening is that a browser is parsing this information, which is going to give you your nice little emoji on the very, very end of this entire circle here. So the browsers can be anything like Safari, or Chrome, Firefox. So all of these things are browsers, and what browsers do is basically parse this HTML and pictures and JavaScript so you can see it all nicely on your phone or your desktop at the end of the day. And yeah, that's how websites work.